And welcome. This is Steve Gillmor, and this is the Gillmor Gang for Friday of, 5 days after the iPad shipped? I think that's basically going to be the demarcation from now on, at least as far as I'm concerned. Pre-iPad, post-iPad. We're waiting on Kevin Marks to show up. If you can hear me, Kevin, please show up. That's him on the right. If we go to the two-shot, please. Could you go to the two-shot? Right, that's him on the right, Kevin Marks, that black square. And on the left in that shot is the infamous Doc Searls, all the way from London, England. Correct?
Yes, indeed, sir.
What is your reason for being reverting to the our owners?
It was part of the cultural exchange with Kevin, as a matter of fact. I came over here, he's over there. We were both on the same panel at BT Center, but Kevin was on the wall there, and or on some gigantic screens looming over everybody. Along with Blaine Cook, coming from the States, while I was local on stage. We were having a conversation, you might say, which it was. It was good.
So, is it possible that he is also in England?
It's possible, but it's doubtful. he's actually he's in California.
All right. Well, I talked to him last night, and he said that he was going to bring Blaine on as well. So, maybe we'll hear from them. Hopefully, we will. Also joining us is the also infamous Robert Scoble.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. So how's post-iPad treating you?
I'm still addicted.
Yeah?
Still addicted and spending more money every day on apps, because every time I meet somebody new, they show me another cool app, and I gotta have it.
Well, according to Steve Jobs, everything is about apps these days, at least on the mobile devices. And it's not about search, which I happen to agree with. Doc, do you agree with that?
I was going to say, I don't know. I didn't hear all of that, but I have absences because I don't have any apps here. Nor do I have an iPad. But I was really digging the thing where the guy puts the iPad in the blender. I don't know if you've seen that. It's pretty cool. Guy breaks an iPad in two and then shoves it in his blender and shows how it will blend, and it reduces it to a kind of fine gray dust. Anyway, I had fun with that. I would love to have an iPad, but nobody will give me one, so I don't have one.
It's awfully big for a blender. What kind of blender is that?
He broke
special
it
iPad
first.
blender?
Yeah, I think it's some kind of very high performance blender that would.
Doc, tilt down a little bit. You're a little high in the shot.
Oh, okay.
And you're also high in the shot, too.
Okay. How's that?
That's excellent.
Okay.
Robert, you're showing us what?
Oh, I just wanted to show you, you talked about search and not using search. I'm using more and more streaming apps. This one is SkyGrid, which brings in, right here, new news. And then I click on it, and it shows me all of the similar articles from around the web, and then I can click on those and see the article, and it's pretty cool. I like this app a lot. But I'd love to talk about that. How my media reading behaviors have changed in the past week, because they've changed pretty sizably.
Okay, you're allowed to talk now.
Okay. It's interesting because both me and Patrick, who's sitting next to me playing with his iPad, say hi, Patrick.
I think it's Patrick and I.
Patrick and I, whatever. I failed English. That's probably why I'm a journalist.
I ducked it. I went to sociology when it started to get serious.
I found I am now reading newspapers again, like the New York Times, or newspaper brands like New York Times, and I bought the Wall Street Journal, and I like that a lot. And I have Associated Press app on here, which is really cool, by the way. And I find I'm reading old school media a lot more than I did a week ago. But I'm seeing that there's a fight between old school media like the Time Magazine app. In fact, I've already uninstalled the Time Magazine app in favor of these new streaming apps. You know, Twitter is the most famous example of a streaming app where it's a stream going down your screen. But even like this Associated Press app is showing you streams of new articles along the bottom, and every few minutes, if you come to this app, there's more new stuff coming in. I find this far different than reading a newspaper, you know, because it's live data coming in. I found the Time Magazine got boring because it didn't change. It was like a magazine on my screen, and that was pretty and cool, but I'm not going to pay $5 more for that. I would pay for a streaming app like this or the Wall Street Journal or something like that.
Doc, what would you pay for, assuming that you had an iPad?
Well, I'd pay for anything that was worth something to me, and I don't really know what that would be yet because I don't have one. So
do you
the best
read
I can do is be cynical and envious at the same time.
Right. Do you read the Wall Street Journal in general?
Yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, I am a subscriber both to the Wall Street Journal print edition, and I pay the additional amount to subscribe to the online thing as well. I'm not sure I'd be interested in paying even more to them for whatever it is that's on the iPad. I feel like it's soaked me for enough already. I'd like to get that for free if I'm already paying for the first two. But we'll see how it goes. I don't know. I mean, I think it's just we're at the fun experimental stage with this stuff. See how it goes.
Yeah, I had a little glitch with the Wall Street. I get the Wall Street Journal online. I have a subscription to that, and they're grandfathering in, at least for the moment, a version of the... oh, we've got Kevin here now, finally. Let me just introduce him and turn his voice on. And that hippie guy next to him.
Yes. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm Blaine.
I think we've had we're going to have the same problem that we had last week, because I've failed to fix it, which is... let us call you back on channel 4, Kevin.
Hey.
All right, thanks. So the glitch with the Wall Street Journal app that I ran into is that I didn't sign onto it yesterday. And one of the best features about the Wall Street Journal iPad app is this 7-day subscription. In other words, it both makes available and allows you to download so that you can read it offline the last 7 days, as Robert's showing on the screen. You can scroll to the right, to the left, Robert, so that we can see that it goes back 7 days. Well, I didn't log on yesterday. I didn't open the app, and when I opened the app today and it downloaded today, well, I think that Robert has the same problem, so this might just be a technical glitch. You can see that there's Tuesday there, and then there's Wednesday, but there is no Wednesday. In fact, there's no Thursday. So I think this is a bug that is similar to the one that the New York Times iPhone app has, which is that you have to every day go and download the paper in order to be able to see it long enough to be able to look at it. And I think that the Wall Street Journal is going to have a problem with this, because right now this is free for subscribers to the online version, but when we actually have to start paying for it, I don't think the feature is going to be worth it. Any comments?
Totally agree.
So
I have the same problem. I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out what shows up and what doesn't. And also, I click on today's, and it takes a little while to download into it and pop up. But it's nice once you get it. It's a lot of fun to play with and read. Some other apps, Patrick. Do you have the photo app you were showing me the other day? Yeah. I'll have Patrick show you that app. Let me move the camera around. Oops. So what's this thing that you're showing us?
Basically, this app just takes one really good photo from the news and displays it, gives you a quick story. It's also from sponsored by Canon, so it gives you tips on how they took the photo. You can go through each day, has a different photo.
And this is the Guardian. I'm sorry about the camera. It's hard to aim this thing. This is the Guardian newspaper, and so all these photos are from the Guardian.
Yeah.
And it's really stunning and beautiful. And it's a free app, right?
Yeah.
Who knew my son would be interested in the news? You know. This shows you that thanks to these new technologies, that mass media can reach a new audience.
Kevin, can you tilt down just a touch? Thank you. And would you introduce the guy to your right?
This is Blaine Cook. Hello. Colleague of mine at BT, formerly of Twitter and Odeo and other interesting things.
And also the inventor of the late great track.
Yes.
So just briefly, since you can satisfy my track mania for a few minutes, what is? Tell us briefly the history of track.
Basically, it was a meeting early on. Jack asked for search. He wanted sort of full text search, and at the time we had one database server and no extra capacity. So I said we couldn't have search. But he's like, wouldn't it be great if we could search for words that people are saying? I'm like, oh, real time search, I can do that. And he was surprised. So I made a bet with him and did it in 10 hours. It was a quick hack, but.
Well, I mean, you could do it. You also took down the service permanently.
I didn't take down the service.
No, but you know what I mean. I mean, apparently it's very difficult to do that on a repeatable basis.
Yeah, I think it's easier than that, but.
So you mean shocking, that gambling is not allowed here, but here are your winnings, sir? In other words, this might be a political or a business decision and have nothing to do with the technology?
Could be.
All right.
They do have track now. The real-time feeds that they have are a close approximation of track. It doesn't deliver it to your timeline, but you could make it do the same thing.
All right. Well,
if you go to yeah.
You're breaking up a little bit, and can you two guys, get even closer?
Sure. Here, let me close this door.
It's that open source kind of thing where you.
We're at the Internet Archive, so they're still rebuilding the building around us.
Really?
Yeah.
And is that still being supported by Sun, or AKA Oracle now, in terms of the infrastructure?
Not sure, but we'd have to ask them.
Interesting question. Doc, does that reminds me, can you give us a brief history of how large mega corporations end up supporting open source software?
Well, it depends on the large mega corporation.
Well, IBM, Oracle.
Yeah.
BT.
Well, IBM is the most interesting case for me because the sort of public story on that is they got a great new CEO who came from a biscuit company that was Lou Gerstner, who decided that open source would be the right thing to do, and a few other high-level people inside the company decided the same thing. Perhaps they advised him. When in fact the company got in compliance with its own engineers. They found that there was a great deal of open source, and Linux in particular, being used inside the company. I heard from one place that there were 13 million Samba servers inside of IBM at the point where they decided that they were going to go into compliance with Linux. And so, and they did a brilliant job of it. But at the same time, one guy, Dan Fry, who runs a division at IBM that employs a number of high-level kernel hackers, maintainers of the kernel, said it took IBM actually about 5 years before they discovered that they could not tell the kernel team what to do. They couldn't get Linux to be biased for their own purposes. And on the whole, it's a happy story, and that went very, very well. I think, the jury is very much out on Sun. I mean, Sun had this
Well, I mean, it's not out on Sun. It's gone. Sun's.
Sun's gone. It's yeah, and it's and Sun made a very big thing about being open in a lot of ways under Jonathan, and I don't know whether it was too little or too late, or just that the rest of the company wasn't built to survive in the long run, or the times were wrong. I'm not sure that the decision to kind of ride the open wagon in whatever way they did was directly involved in their having been eaten by Oracle in the long run. But an interesting thing is that Oracle also employs a number of people that work on the Linux kernel and work on open source products as well. It's not hostile to open source necessarily. It just happens to sell the world's, largest and most profitable, enterprise software.
Yeah, Oracle's made a lot of investments over the years in open source.
Yeah, they have. They have. So I don't want to knock over Oracle on that. I think they've made a number of strategic decisions to back certain development of certain code bases, and they've done a good job of that. And it's an open question whether they're going to be able to keep up with whatever Sun was doing. The MySQL story is certainly far from over. Probably a number of new stories are beginning there. I don't know. I mean, I actually think, and I said this last night, that we're very early in the history of wherever this is going to go.
Right. Well, it's a constant evolution, it seems. For example, there's a team. Robert, you can fill me in on this. There's a team at Rackspace that came over from Sun. Yeah, am I hearing you or not?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I had you on mute. Sorry about that. We hired the MySQL Drizzle team, and they're working on the next version of MySQL, which is pretty interesting. Our CTO, when he saw it at last year's MySQL Dev Conference, was very, very amazed.
Okay, you need to get a little closer to the microphone because it's.
I'm right next to it, so
Oh, that's
I don't
better
know.
now. Well, just keep your head
Okay,
down.
sorry about that.
Think foxhole.
So, anyways, we hired the MySQL Drizzle team, and Adrian, one of our CTOs, was extremely excited at seeing the Drizzle technology last year at the MySQL conference, which is coming up again this week. So there should be more out this week about what we're doing.
The reason I wanted to bring up open source and it's sort of an end-to-run round to get to something that seems to be a pretty hot issue related to the announcements yesterday about iPhone 4.0 and a clause in the developers agreement regarding, basically killing Flash, but along the way, perhaps killing some other ways of developing for the iPhone platform. Kevin, have you looked into this at all? Are you aware of this issue?
So I've read the new clause, and what they're saying is we want you to compile native applications using Xcode and Objective-C, or make web applications. What they don't want is somebody producing a tool that generates the applications directly without going through their compiler. So I think it doesn't preclude someone doing a complete app generator, but they'd have to do an intermediate Xcode generator. That would be my sense of what you'd have to do. Or you can go the HTML5 route and build apps that way.
You mean just build them to the web, but you don't get access to all of the internal APIs going through the web.
Yeah, that's true.
So it seems to be a second-class citizen. Blaine, I know that you're pretty outspoken about a number of these kinds of issues. What's your thought on what Apple's doing?
I think that, just from the development perspective, there's no reason to write native apps anymore. You can do some pretty amazing things with just HTML5 and JavaScript, and the amount of work and the control that Apple puts around developers now is I don't think it's worth it really. Besides the sort of the kind of offensive, well, maybe Apple gets to decide to shut down your company. I have friends, a good friend of mine, Evan Henshaw-Plath, was starting sort of a company to help people who do Flash games port their games to the iPhone, and his whole company is in limbo because Apple made some random decision.
Yeah, but isn't it a little ironic that somebody who's bet their career or a significant part of their livelihood on Flash, which is certainly not an open technology, that they're in jeopardy now by another company? I mean, it seems a little. I mean, I think that the open source complaint, coming from or to the Android platform, seems to have some more interesting dynamics than Flash developers complaining. I mean, it's not that we don't, feel for people who are getting caught in a meat grinder over, internet and vendor politics, but.
Sure, I think the question is more one of sharecropping, right? Like Apple is encouraging an environment where they're basically conscripting sharecroppers, and that's not a position that anyone wants to be in. So I think that that part of it is really problematic, and I don't know. I don't see any reason at this point to be developing native apps. I wrote a little while ago an EPUB reader in pure JavaScript and HTML, and I've spent a week of spare time development on it, and so it's not as polished as iBooks, but it has most of the functionality of iBooks, except it's completely free. Anyone can install it. You can customize the way it looks. You don't have to choose from the 5 fonts that Apple gives you. You can choose any font you want. You can choose different shaped books. And it ran out of the box on Android, iPhone, and all major browsers except for Internet Explorer. But IE9 it should run out of the box on. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of experience, and we've got access to, like, it has swipe, gestures and all that sort of thing. You can do geolocation. Soon we're going to have both read and write audio and video APIs. I think the long-term view on this, short-term, sure, there's an argument for doing native iPhone apps and whatnot, but it comes across as very cynical to me. I think that Apple would take this short-term gain to constrict things when it's clear that HTML5 and JavaScript are going to be the long run things. And to put a stronger point on it, if Apple is successful at what they're doing right now, then in 5 years or 10 years' time, they will be brought up on antitrust charges and they'll be stopped. End of story. I mean, this behavior is exactly the sort of behavior that gets punished in antitrust courts. And so why would we tolerate it now when it's only a question of size and momentum that decides when that behavior is not okay, right? So
I'm not sure I agree with you about 5 years antitrust. I think one of the theories that I've been propounding for a while now is that Apple and Google are basically in lockstep about this. I mean, one of the things that Google provides with the Android platform is deniability about any kind of monopoly takeover of any of these, of mobile, for example.
It's not just deniability. I mean, it is practically true. One of the things that I've read 4 people ask for the iPad was, we want HyperCard back. Well, the reason you haven't got HyperCard back is that Apple has deliberately stopped releasing it. And therefore they have control over it because it's proprietary code. Whereas open source projects can survive company change of direction and indeed company death, and the open source project lives on. So MySQL will be an example. Oracle can't kill MySQL now because it's been open source, it's been forked twice, there's a Drizzle implementation, there's a bunch of other implementations out there. So that when you make something open source, what you're saying is, I'm making a commitment to this that will survive both my company's interest and indeed my company, and that's a very, very strong statement. And a big chunk of the value in HTML5 is that the WebKit browser is fully open source. Has been a great thing that Apple have done. I've been impressed with that team working in public and working on standards there. The Android and the iPhone, despite being rivals, are actually running a big chunk of the same code in WebKit and more so, they're running common standards in HTML5 and the extensions to HTML5.
Exactly. So, in fact, what they're doing is that they're both creating a locked, walled garden for their native apps, which has the advantage for them and their developers who choose to go that route of making, piles of money, which binds them quite successfully to the platform, just in the same way that .NET binds, .NET developers are bound to the Windows and Silverlight platforms. So, I mean,
Right.
but at the same time, I think that we're seeing from Microsoft a similar strategy, which is to have a two-track approach where they're supporting
Yeah.
HTML5 using the hardware acceleration aspects of that, particularly related to video, to sell Windows machines and PCs, and at the same time, they're all leveraging HTML5. And I mean, I think Apple's move against Flash has been fantastic because it's getting rid
Absolutely.
of.
And let me be clear. Like, I mean, I don't care about Android native apps. I don't care about Symbian native apps. No one's ever cared about Symbian native apps. I mean, I think my point here is that there's this whole it's this cynical take by Apple. I think, like, Android, at least you can install apps. There's sort of a route to just go and install apps. Apple is exerting, based on what you're saying, an unnecessary level of control here. They're showing a very cynical approach to their developers because, on the one hand, HTML5 and JavaScript is completely open, right? But on the other hand, it's this very specific platform.
But how is that more cynical?
Steve.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
I'm playing Geometry Wars here. This is an app that you can't do in HTML5. You can't even try to do this kind of app in UI and speed in HTML5. And these are the kinds of apps that my son and I are excited about on the iPhone platform or iPad platform. And we're not about to care about the arguments that you're putting forward.
Well, Robert, have you seen some of the new stuff that people are doing with Canvas? I mean, JavaScript.
I have, but it's not to this level. I'm
I know,
sorry.
but Robert,
I haven't seen an app done in HTML5 that comes anywhere close to the kinds of games I'm seeing on the iPad.
Well, let me disagree with you about one thing. I mean, I think that's true today, but this is such a quickly moving environment. One of the big arguments that that Adobe put forward about Flash is that it is way built out in terms of interactivity and advertising metrics, those kinds of things. What Jobs showed yesterday was with iAds was basically, along with multitasking and the various things that they're doing, granted that it's on the proprietary platform, but it still is basically taking that argument completely away. And what is going to prevent them from slowly but surely, in response to Android pressure, from opening up those capabilities to the web APIs? I mean, it seems inevitable that HTML5 is going to have precisely similar capabilities. The question is, as Blaine puts it, whether this is a short-term advantage is it worth the short-term advantage? And I want to hear Doc on this.
Well, I have to say I actually missed some of what you were saying, but I thought that but I did hear what Blaine said and what Robert said, and I think we need AND logic here. Obviously, the native apps, that you can do some cool stuff on the iPad. That's fine. But to me, what matters is that somebody like Blaine can program from more than one platform at a time and do it in a way that is not labor intensive and still creative. And yeah, it's not going to cover all the bases. It's not going to do the flashiest stuff on that Robert wants, but that doesn't mean it's not cool. Okay,
so you're basically saying that you don't think that this is an onerous problem that Apple is getting into, short of having some people pretty pretty pissed off on the Flash developer side, and perhaps the
Well-
mono
Well, I mean, so the other thing
Well, I
is,
think
side.
I just want to say, I mean, I'm not. I certainly don't want to be the first to say Apple is not onerous. For God's sakes, I mean, I think Apple's doing a lot of onerous stuff with market control and
Well,
the
tell me
stinkering all those
tell me
applications.
a
I think
large corporation that is not onerous in some way.
yeah, but we're talking about this particular one. Okay, I think
Okay.
that it's a closed marketplace, and look, I develop in it. I'm doing stuff in that space right now. We're starting with the iPhone, and
It's
moving to other
closed because
platforms there.
it's successful, right?
It's closed because they want it that way.
But
I would
if
not,
they
I would
couldn't get
not
away with
connect
it,
success with being closed.
Yeah,
if
I
they
think-
if they weren't successful, they wouldn't be able to get away with it.
And let's
well, that's another issue. That's a different issue. It's go ahead, sir.
Yeah, as a counterexample, look at what Xbox, like Microsoft's doing with Xbox. They had a completely closed platform. All gaming platforms were completely closed for years and years and years. And now with the arcade, they're opening it up. It's still not, trivial. You still have to sign these horrible licensing contracts and all this sort of thing. But the bottom line is they're opening it up, and we're getting some of the most innovative, interesting games that have ever been produced. And Apple is helping in that regards, but it's actually we've seen incredible advancements in game technology because of more open approaches to licensing and whatnot from the games industry. And I think that we've been the tech community has been looking for that openness in gaming technology for a long time, and we're only seeing it now. So it seems like stepping backwards that Apple is pushing in on a traditionally open development environment. I think that's the thing that people are upset about, and rightfully so, that Apple is taking something that traditionally, like even in the Windows environment, was not, tightly controlled by the vendor, and they're turning it into something that's tightly controlled by the vendor. And we don't really know how that's going to play out. So,
but the other thread in gaming that I've seen tracking GDC and stuff like the conversations there was the explosion of casual gaming and social gaming through Facebook and through Open Social and MySpace and the other sites that support that, and that's been disrupting the games industry's model of itself, because the games industry has been focused on these dedicated platforms that are expensive. The games cost $50. You expect they're for gamers who are going to spend hours and hours and hours on these things, and we're starting to see that actually the stuff that you are building that runs in the browser, that runs inside Facebook, that gives you an overlay that lets you do other things, are getting significant engagement, getting lots of people interested and excited in them, and making a fair bit of money for people as well. So that's been a disruption where a bit more standardization and again semi-proprietary moving towards open has enabled quite a lot to happen there.
and I'm not a fan of Adobe either. I think that Adobe would stand to gain quite a lot if they started putting some of the technology, bad as it may be on Macs, into Canvas and making Canvas much faster. And then, some of the Canvas APIs are a little bit limiting right now. There's not, there aren't good sprite libraries. A lot of the vector stuff that Flash does on top of a bitmap Canvas-like library, that's basically what Flash is, those libraries don't really exist. And I think that Adobe, if they were smart right now, would be working very hard to sort of take the role that jQuery has taken in web development and JavaScript development and apply that to graphics on HTML and Canvas, rather than trying to push their own, proprietary, even though it's kind of open technology. So I think there's you can look at this both ways, but I'm actually more concerned about organizations like or projects like PhoneGap, where it's taking an HTML app and making it faster. And that's all it's doing. So it's a bit of a gray area, and it remains to be seen how Apple's going to treat that. But the point is, we have no idea, and we're completely at their whim if we want to be on the best hardware or whatnot.
Right. I mean, at the moment they've said you've got to build a native app. If you just build a native app that opens a browser window and does stuff in the browser, is that okay?
Right.
There's a chunk of things that do that. PhoneGap, I think, is like that. Right.
So, Doc, how do you think this is going to shake out in the next 6 months?
In the next 6 months, I think what Apple's going to do is come out with something that obsoletes the current iPad, and 6 months after that, they'll do another one of those. And they're going to take a long time before they open up. I think that Steve Jobs doesn't do anything he can't control, and he feels he needs to control this marketplace this way at this time. I think that what's going to happen is other pads will come out. They'll be less slick, they'll be less cool, they'll be less interesting in some ways, but they will be open. And I think that'll be a cool thing. So I'm
you
looking
think
forward to those.
Android, basically?
Android and Symbian. Those are the two at this point, but probably Android first.
There's some reports about RIM coming out with a device.
I haven't heard that.
That I've seen. Yeah. So, Blaine, what is it that you're actually working on right now at BT?
So I'm working a lot on the sort of PubSub, Hubbub, and WebFinger standards and OAuth and that sort of thing, as well as some open source messaging projects that haven't been released yet, but will in due course. So.
Can you explain why Buzz doesn't seem to be able to get a Twitter message in less than a week?
I'm good friends with the Buzz guys. I don't actually use Buzz. I kind of turned it off.
Well, but you said PubSub, Hubbub. I mean,
yeah,
they seem to have some sort of skin in that game.
Well, Twitter doesn't.
And that's a real-time
sure.
message bus, right?
Twitter doesn't push PubSub, Hubbub, so that would be a limiting factor. I mean, right now, if you want to get real-time feeds from Twitter, there's a number of complicated hoops you can go through. I mean, I know that Google has the full stream, so I don't know. You'd have to ask like Brad or Chris or someone why they're not pulling in real-time tweets. But I do know.
Blaine and Steve, from what I've been hearing from other developers who worked on the Buzz project or close to it, it's the Google infrastructure that is forcing that team to live inside the Google infrastructure, which was designed for search pages and not for real-time messaging streams. And they're having trouble getting the two hooked up. Does that sound reasonable?
I could buy that. I mean, if they have to do the delta merges and whatnot, Gmail is pretty fast, so I'm not really sure if they're using that same infrastructure, if they've had to build their own. I mean, I don't know the internal details of how, but I do know that PubSub Hubbub, like most of the PubSub Hub that Brett has running, has very, very low latency for most feeds. So as long as they're pinging that hub, those feeds are fast. So I'm not so concerned about specific implementations. I mean, I think the important thing is to have sound technologies that developers will use, and I think that there are lots of ways to do this, and where the latency is unrelated to the specific implementation. So we'll get there eventually. But
and it may be a terms of business thing as well. We don't know what terms Twitter and Google have agreed on the use of the Firehose. It may be that they've agreed it for search but not for Buzz. We can't know that. And one of the problems of doing stuff via private APIs that have a BizDev guy attached is that it's much harder to adapt to do something else with than with an open standard.
Right. So then why is BT working with people like yourselves on open standards? There seems to be a sort of a dichotomy between all these good ideas in the open or so-called open environment and the real world of actually getting them to work across large private companies that don't want them to work.
Yeah, there's always a problem when people don't want things to work. Well, we can point to examples where we're pointing to the example of Google and Apple using the same underlying source code to run the browsers on their two competing platforms as an example of where this can work. And if you can look at HTML5 as a standardization model that has worked between multiple companies as well. And at some, the challenge is getting to the point where getting the people to sit down and agree that it moving this stuff back and forth is actually more useful to them than whatever insecurity they have from a business point of view. We're having a simple conversation here with the Internet Archive people about the book scanning that they're doing, and there are three big groups doing book scanning at the moment. There's Google, the Internet Archive, and Amazon. At the moment, they don't have a great way of interchanging data, and hopefully they can move towards that. But it's one of these points where you only really tend to be able to write the standards once you have more than one implementation of it, so you can see what they have in common, and then you can find what you can agree on. And that's kind of what happened with Open Socialist, what happened with the Puzzle Pub-Up stuff.
And I think it's important to remember that, it's a bit of a cliche, I suppose, but innovation doesn't come from where you're looking for it, right? So, Twitter and Facebook and the large incumbents don't really have any reason to move on this. Just like AOL and CompuServe didn't have any reason to move on standardizing on SMTP in the early days. There was no reason to expect them to open that stuff up. I look at a lot of this real-time stuff as actually being more interesting in terms of, companies like Foursquare and Gowalla, right? Like there's been all of this Foursquare versus Gowalla epic battle to the death sort of discussion lately. And I just think that's ridiculous because, especially with location data, right? I only care about publishing location data so that my friends can see that, so that those coincidences can happen. If I've cut the number of coincidences that can happen simply by only using one of the providers, then I've limited the usefulness of that technology in total, and you can apply that to Foursquare and Gowalla. And if they shared that information, and Gowalla appears to be making motions to do that, then both companies benefit because they both have a much larger network to leverage that network effect.
Right, and there's actually probably a more important reason for the two of them to get together. I mean, it's always true that the player that's in second place wants to share with the player that's in first place, but it reminds me of that famous movie. Doc probably remembers it because he's almost as old as I am.
I moved past you, Steve.
Yeah, I know. I was being nice, or I don't know who I was being nice to, but Bambi versus Godzilla. Do you remember that one?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So you've got these two. The fight to the death between
Gowalla
and Foursquare, and all of a sudden Facebook comes in, as Robert Scoble suggested about 2 months ago, and goes whomp. They've got a lot of oars in the water here, so it makes sense to finish the point. It makes sense that those two smaller companies might get together in order to blunt the possibility of Facebook becoming too dominant too quickly.
Right, and I think that the Foursquare Gowalla thing is only the next most obvious place that we're going to see this come from, right? I mean, there's all sorts of people working on interesting things out there on the web, and it's only become more difficult to build the next Foursquare Facebook or MySpace or Twitter because people's attention is already so dilute. And so trying to get people to sign up for new social networks is getting harder and harder. So I think that there's more incentive, not less, to do this sort of thing. So I mean, we'll see how it evolves. We're certainly not there yet.
Robert's holding up the interface. Look, this is what I see when I don't have my glasses on. That's what that looks like.
Move it back a little bit there.
Yeah. So what is that?
On what?
Foursquare.
Uh-huh.
On what?
On an iPhone.
Well, when they can check into the Gillmor Gang, I think it'll be interesting. I seriously, when Dennis Crowley was on the show months ago, I made the suggestion that virtual check-ins might be a place to go. And at the beginning of the show, Dennis thought that wasn't going to happen. And by the end, after talking to some of the other panelists, he seemed to be leaning more toward it. Do you think that there's a virtual check-in model that's going to emerge out of one of these players? Anybody take that one?
Yeah, Comcast is already announcing that they're going to build the Foursquare for TV, so you can check into Lost or check into 24 and let your friends on Twitter know that you're addicted to TV.
Well, that's a sort of trivial subset of activity streams. So yeah, sure. I mean, we already have that. We already have Netflix generating that from as a feed, as a standardized activity stream when you watch stuff online now. So that already exists.
And this afternoon, I'm putting up a video with Double Dutch, which makes white label Foursquares, and they're already working with like real estate companies to have real estate agents do check-ins with their own brand and everything without using Foursquare. And so that's one angle. There's others coming. There's a lot of. I think the check-in gesture is going to be used in a whole bunch of places.
Well, the iAds thing that Jobs showed yesterday, I think, is really the elephant in the room here. It's like this huge, Trojan horse for location. The idea that you can have 1 billion impressions of those commercials coming across that network, namely the 100 million iPhones and iPads that are available and iTouches. It's a new television network, basically. You put that up against or next to Skype, which is now the largest carrier in the world, I believe, Doc?
I don't know. Tell me more about iAds, because I don't know how an iAds becomes a TV network. That doesn't make sense to me. Is it just an advertising thing, or is it something more than that?
It's just an advertising thing, but the basic logic of it is that they, as Jobs suggested, if he broadcasts an ad over this network every, I forget how many minutes, every 30 minutes, that's 10 ads a day, 100 million devices, that's a billion. I forget what the interval is. It's a very large network, which one of the things that he showed with multitasking is that they can basically go into the ad space, the so-called ad space, which in fact is almost like another corollary or parallel universe of content, with delivered by the so-called advertiser. This is a huge kind of interactive and of course they play videos. They can do anything they want in this space, and at the same time you can drop right back into the stream or whatever. It seems like a really powerful broadcast network that's being.
Can I get away? How can I get away from that? There's nothing you described to me that attracts me as a user.
Well,
and I'm not sure if they're showing it on my iPhone, and I have no choice about.
Do you watch
the
Super Bowl? Do you watch these kinds of broadcast models at all?
Well, I watched the Super Bowl. I watched the NCAA playoffs. I expect to see it there. I just don't. And if I'm seeing that on an iPhone, that's fine. I'm glad to see that on an iPhone. I don't have a problem with those ads. I have a problem with seeing ads I don't want in places I'm not expecting to see them. And I don't know if that's what Apple's proposing or not. I still don't have an idea.
I think
I've been
proposing
offline, so I don't really know what they're proposing. Yeah. So I'm being ignorant here.
I don't think you're being ignorant. I think that you're raising the right question, which is, are users going to accept it? And I think the answer is yes, because that kind of interruption in return for services and upsells or cross-sells or free coffee cups, the whole virtual check-in model, it's going to move in that direction probably very quickly.
You've made a connection between virtual check-in and advertising, and I'm still not seeing it. And I got to say, by the way, I'm a heavy Foursquare user. I don't even know why. I mean, I'm the mayor of like 15 places.
Well, the last time that anybody said that they didn't know why was me about Twitter, and it turned out that there are a lot of people who are using things for no reason, but it turns out to be pretty big deal.
But I did a search for Internet Archive coming up here, and Google served an ad in the map telling me to manage library computers. So they're already doing the insert ads in random places in navigation. Seems like a really stupid ad to me, but clearly they're trying.
I think there's also, I don't know if you guys saw the Beyonce and Lady Gaga video for Telephone. That was.
I didn't, but Lady Gaga is fantastic.
So
she's really, really great. I mean, she's the closest thing to another Beatles that's coming along in a long time.
Okay. I won't go there, but
Oh, I'm there.
the latest video
Come on over. It's fine.
was
1 billion views on YouTube for Lady
right,
Gaga.
and so that video has at least 6 commercials in it, because if you look at that video, it's all about placed product, like really obvious placed product usage, and so they I mean, I'm sure that they went and they said, we're going to put this everywhere on the internet, not just on iPhones, not just on the iPad, not just on people's computers, but like everywhere on the internet, on all TVs. And they said, hey, I can't remember if it was Burger King or Coca-Cola or who all the advertisers were, but I think they went to those advertisers and said, hey, we're going to get 1 billion impressions over the next month for your ads.
Well, I mean, this isn't a new idea. John Lennon did it with Give Peace a Chance. Spreading product placement. In his case, it was about peace and war is over if you want it, etc. This has been happening for a long time, and it's only going to accelerate in real time.
An advertiser, do you pay someone to create something that's going to be played, tens of billions of times over years and act as a persistent advertisement? Or are you going to pay Steve Jobs to throw a couple of model dialogues up into someone's iPhone a few times, right? I mean, I think there has to be a shift, right? Like the whole Viacom versus Google lawsuit right now is really underscoring that there's this whole shift in advertising that's not really being talked about in terms of actual paid advertising, right? In terms of how impressions are counted.
Well, I agree with you that it's called branded something, and it's a big deal on Madison Avenue.
Yeah, no. I watched Bones last week, and the two characters had randomly, for no plot reason, had a discussion about the car they were driving. It's like, what the hell was that doing in my narrative? This can be done very, very obtrusively and very annoyingly, and it's what they're trying to do to stop us fast forwarding the ads that are there.
But I mean, the Beatles had long hair, and our parents were horrified, or at least some people's parents were horrified. I mean, this kind of social change through embedded social signals is not a new thing, and there are people who, like Lady Gaga, who perpetuate these kinds of images and sounds and production value. It's just extraordinary.
But is she the exception to the rule, Steve? I mean, and for the most part, most advertising is still noise. Like Kevin pointed out, there was a miss with the Google ad that was placed in front of him. I'm not saying advertising is a bad thing. I just don't think I'm going to buy that this is just this great, wonderful new thing. So Apple's finding more ways to throw advertising in front of you. Not interesting to me. Inevitable, I suppose. But
well, I think it's a battle between not interesting and less not interesting. It's not a battle between nothing and these things. There's a whole range of artistry that can be applied to these things. I mean, Monty Python, they made a career out of lampooning bad advertising, etc. I mean, the Firesign did the same thing. I mean, the first social media application was the Funway and Dwarf, where these things were passing us by, sort of a Minority Report on acid, 10 years earlier.
Yeah, sure. So this is old stuff. So when
it's old good stuff.
When is the future going to stop being better and better advertising, or better and better fantasies about advertising?
I don't know, Doc. I mean, you talk about VRM.
Yeah.
Okay, connect the dots.
Which dots?
Is there going to be a VRM?
I can't connect any advertising dots.
Is there going to be a VRM game that you hook up to the accelerometer, like Robert's showing us?
Yeah, there you go. Robert, why isn't there an ad on that thing? I think there's a place on there to put an ad.
They've already
Just
got your
wait.
money.
Yeah, just wait.
Version 2.0 will have an ad right on that board.
Yeah, there you go. Improved by advertising.
Well, but the
Better
point
than
is
ever.
that the
Now even more promotional than last time.
going back to the sort of checking into a place or a media or whatever, a medium. I mean, if you effectively, that's what hashtags are. That's what we're doing there. Is we're saying I'm checking into interest in this topic. If I spent a big chunk of this week following the digital economy bill in Parliament in the UK, and a whole bunch of other people did too. And the way that we checked into that was we used the #DE bill hashtag to discuss what was going on in Parliament for me on the other side of the world, for some of them obviously a lot more locally. And the sort of part of the odd part of that was that some of the MPs started watching this too and interacting back with us, which was if you want interactive television, I think that's a fairly good mark along the way there, where we're actually debating the speeches in Parliament with the people giving the speeches. So I think we're constructing this stuff already, and to say that there's going to be this amazing new thing, I think we're already building that. We already have these ways of connecting bits and pieces together, and we're going to get more of those over time as we move forward.
Yeah, I think that's all true, but I also know that for me, the iPad is a supreme reading instrument. I just enjoy it. I like the way it works. I like the way when you double click on a column, the thing comes up so that I can, with my 150-year-old eyes, I can actually see it. I like the fact that I don't like the fact that it doesn't have widgets yet. But one of the things that Jobs said in the Q&A was that he actually was kind of funny about it. He said, well, we only shipped this thing on Saturday and we rested on Sunday, so we can do anything. So I think that they will do something, and it's not, I mean, as Robert's doing the page turn, I haven't even looked at that. To me, the most exciting app on the iPad for books is Kindle. And I think that what's going to happen there is going to be really interesting. It goes back to what Blaine was talking about. They're going in through the so-called HTML5 hole and presenting an excellent experience that's plenty good enough, and it allows my daughter to keep the Kindle in her backpack while I can read the same stuff that I've already bought on the Kindle. I mean, we're achieving this kind of sort of de facto data portability that's beginning to emerge out of the competition between Apple and Google. That's my feeling. Any comments on that, Doc?
I think that will inevitably happen. I think there will be data portability there, but because the iPad, at least at this stage, is so purely a consumption device. I just wonder how much progress can be made beyond the very pretty stuff that we're seeing so far. But I don't know.
That's certainly true. I mean, we've managed to turn the web browser into a production device by adding forms and things to it, and the same is true of the iPad. Yeah, some of the interactions are a bit different, and you're not going to want to write your next novel on it, but it's certainly good enough for the short commentary, and probably going to be very good for doing dynamic sketching or music editing and stuff like that. I expect we'll see a bunch of apps that, like we have seen for the iPhone, that work quite well for doing creative audio and things like that. The question is, will they be able to post them back to other people, or will they just be sort of trapped in the ghetto of that app?
Well, I saw Mike Arrington unpack a dock plus keyboard yesterday for the iPad. I mean, this is the atomization of the MacBook Air, and it's proceeding rather rapidly.
Well, it's for the Bluetooth keyboard as well.
So in November, I bought a MacBook Air, full knowing that it is an inferior computer to just about everything out there, but it's light. And my premise is, in 3 years, maybe 2 years, who knows, we're all going to have, essentially iPad-like devices that we can set down in front of our desks and use as real computers. but I don't think that I was debating, I'm going to get an iPad. It'd be great for development on this ebook reader because it's got this this beautiful swipey screen that works really well and it's reasonably fast. And I ended up on some Engadget page, and they had a list of other iPad-like devices that are coming out, and all of them are better than the iPad. In terms of what they support and all of these sorts of things. So,
but
That's bull.
the thing about go ahead, Robert.
That's bull. I used to sell NEC tablets back in 2002, and it did a lot more supposedly than this iPad does. It had a full version of Windows running on it, or you could run a full version of Linux on it, and it doesn't do as well as this thing does. You guys don't get this. I keep hearing this argument from Nokia that the Nokia phone is better than the iPhone because it has a better camera, it has a better screen resolution. It's not about that. It's about the user experience, and this thing has a superior user experience to anything I've seen, even on the drawing pads.
I love how Robert's voice goes up in pitch as he gets excited.
Yeah, that dentist drill little effect comes in there too. It's pretty cool.
But I think Robert's exactly right, and I think there's another thing I think you're right too, Blaine, in the sense that the multiplicity of competing products in aggregate produce a benefit for guess who? Steve Jobs. I mean, yesterday we saw him. He rolled out multitasking. He rolled out folders. He rolled out a whole bunch of stuff that is going to bring the lion's share of what Nexus 1 does better today. It's going to be working on the iPhone, and then in September on the iPad. It's pushing the ball forward rapidly, and at the same time, Jobs is paying attention to battery usage, the storage issues, the whole problem of privacy in terms of location devices and being able to check them off and do things like that. He's basically taking the playbook from the Android system and basically doing his usual kind of compressed and many would say closed version of that. But for us who have these devices, it's not so long to wait until summer for most of the versions. I mean, I love the Nexus 1. It's really easy to read. The type is better. The screen is got more real estate, and it's brighter and much more detail. But I unplugged it because I needed a plug-in to charge the iPad, so I don't use it. I go to the iPad. It's easy. If the Nexus 1's easier to read, the iPad's twice as easy to read.
Sure, and I mean, Robert, I think you're absolutely right. The question is, what are the things that make the iPad better? Because we know that it's not. I mean, there's the Apple UI, right? And obviously they put an incredible amount of polish on that, and that's incredibly important that they do that. But there's all sorts of applications that are total crap that people use all the time. That are just as mind expanding. I mean, people use Exchange, right? Like, I don't know how they do that, but they do.
Because
so what are the?
It's very simple because Exchange is the only thing that I've seen that has a decent calendar that lets you work with other people. I'm a very heavy Google Calendar user, and it doesn't work with other people the way Exchange does. Not yet.
So what are the things that make the iPad so much better? Is it just the touch screen? Is it that the screen quality is so good? Is it that there's an Apple logo on it? What are the features that make it?
Well, the fundamental feature.
Together.
The fundamental.
It's everything together, and a good example of this. My son is sitting here. He was very anti the iPad, right? When you first heard about it, and tell me what you thought about the iPad when you first saw Steve Jobs announce it.
Well, I thought it was a fail. I thought it had no use. I thought it was a niche product which no one would ever really have a use for. I was wrong.
And why were you? What got you to change your mind in the first 10 minutes of having your hand on one?
As soon as you pick it up, you realize that it does have a use. It does the web it does video, it does all these things better than a laptop, in my opinion. At least
There's another profound shift that's going on with this thing as I use it on a daily basis. First of all, I've got a MacBook Air, and I've been down to TechCrunch the last few days. We're working on the Disrupt conference in May, and I've left the laptop at home and taken the iPad. So I'm sitting there, and I noticed it this morning. I was going through some stuff, and I was reading some stuff, and I was jumping around, and I realized I'm getting used to using my hands to be able to do all this stuff. I'm not even thinking about a mouse, and I'm barely thinking about a keyboard.
Right. I mean, I totally agree with that, right? Like, I mean, I am a total convert to tactile interfaces, right? Like, as soon as I could get the magic mouse or whatever I did, like, I was done, right? That sort of tactility is fantastic. But I haven't heard anything that's specific to the iPad versus tablets. It's more the form factor, and I love the concept of tablet.
But Robert's point about the aggregation of these network effects around this new model, you know, it's easier and much more pleasurable to read on the iPad than any other device. I'm starting to use these tools. I mean, it's one thing to have this little device that you're up here poking at, you know, and at the same time trying to avoid running into people because you're running around doing it, and having something which, on a break in a meeting, or even while a meeting's going on, you basically, you see something come up, or you go check something, or you navigate to something. It's a much more relaxed feeling, and it's also a very productive feeling. And at the same time, you're learning how to be able to navigate in this different paradigm. And what Apple has done so far, and I'm pretty sure that Google will come up to fairly quickly, is to be able to integrate these tools in such a way that we are, you know, seamlessly shifted over to this new paradigm. I mean, the iPhone is, in fact, you know, a small iPad, not the other way around. But it was useful to train us in this model so that we could then want more real estate in which to be able to operate.
And it does make, I mean, I've noticed this with the Droid, is that I found myself reading more and more on that precisely because the screen makes it possible. And I'm sure the iPad effect is stronger than that, especially if you're coming from an iPhone, because you've got 9 times as many pixels, whereas the Droid, you've got 3 times as many pixels. But I've been, you know, not, you know, this wasn't a conscious effort. I just realized, actually, I may as well read it here. I don't need to go and get the laptop out. And I'm sure you'll see that thing in spades with the iPad. I still feel that there's an intermediate form factor that will be great, which will be that many pixels with the Droid's pixel density, which would be a smaller thing. But I can understand, you know, why they made that big jump first to make people understand that.
Well, I'd like to start to bring this to a close, and before I forget it, I'd like to. I'll give you a shot. Just a second, Steve? Robert.
Okay.
Just hang on. Before I forget it, I haven't done this before, but I'd like to suggest that if anybody who's watching this show live or on YouTube when it's released wants to contribute to a fund to buy Doc an iPad.
I have a substitute right here. This is
Yeah.
I just have to show you this. This is when I got to the hotel here in London. There was no Wi-Fi service, and so I went down and complained. And I walked around the hotel with my iPhone trying to find where the Wi-Fi base station was. And they said, "Well, it's actually under your bed. The one for your whole floor is under your bed." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "Well, I'm gonna go upstairs. I'll fix it for you." And he reaches under my bed and he pulls out this thing that is a Wi-Fi base station, and
it looks like something from The Prisoner, basically.
It has duct tape on it. It was taped to the bottom of the bed like a bomb, and
you're getting it on your teeth too.
He replugged it in again, and he said, "Now it's going to work again, right?" And it didn't. I carry with me a little Apple Express modem, a little boxy thing, and I plug the Ethernet into that, and that works fine. And that's what we're using right now. So since then, I've decided that this is the thing that they put under your bed to tell if you're masturbating or not. That's what this thing is for.
Oh, it's taken an ugly turn all of a sudden. What is this thing that you're showing us, Kevin, or is that just completely random?
This is the intercom system at the Internet Archive. I thought it was a beautiful thing. It's a lovely bit of retro technology here.
Okay, and Robert, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, where I'm broadcasting from is Dave Weiner's house, and he wrote a really interesting post about Twitter killers, predicting that or hoping that Twitter brings out a new metadata display system this week, and he's been getting lots of confirmations that he was indeed right in this post. And I just expected, since we hyped up the iPhone so much, that we would talk a little bit about what's coming for Twitter this week coming up.
Well, as I read Dave's article about, I'm sure that he doesn't want to come on the show, but if he's certainly welcome to. But what I got out of it is that he feels that they're going to basically do an Apple and kick off a bunch of the early adopters of the platform and sort of take metadata in and make it private. And I think what he's suggesting is that that's not a good idea, and that they need to, become more of what he famously calls a reef. Is that what you think is that what you're saying, Dave?
Well, he's not here, but I would say that's accurate. That he is seeing that Twitter is going to mess with the ecosystem quite a bit this week, and it'll be an interesting week to watch as they turn on these new features. We've also seen a little piece of the new user interface that's going to be turned on, and it looks dramatically different than what we have today. And it's going to get me to stop using TweetDeck and stop using Seismic and start using the web page for a while until the clients catch back up to the UI. And I'm sure it'll be interesting to talk with some of those client producers and see what their reactions are to the new changes. But the really interesting thing is this idea of a new piece of a new metadata display surface that's going to be along with each tweet that will allow Twitter to put advertising and other things into that display surface. And it'll be interesting to see how that opens up something new for the next stage of Twitter developers, third-party Twitter developers.
Doc, any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
I just want to know what's going on behind Robert's head. There's a giant display behind his head.
It looks like Dave's.
Looking into his ear.
It looks like
other things.
That's Dave Weiner's photo.
His photo looping thing. Very cool. Very cool. And he picks up the AP pictures and runs them in a loop of some kind. Cool.
So any last thoughts for this show other than about the missing Dave Weiner? Doc.
Oh, for me, no, I just, of course, I would love to have an iPad to fool with. So if you guys want to take up a collection and get me one, I'd be glad to. I want to know how Robert managed to get two of them.
Robert's rich. That's how.
Yeah, that's how it's done. I guess I have to. I forgot.
Come on, Steve. I spent more for a 14.4 modem in college than I spent on the iPhone and iPads.
Well, I'm not showing this tape to my daughter, who's already saying that she's going to buy an iPad with, quote, her money. She's 16, so I don't know where her money is coming from. Blaine, any last thoughts?
No, just keep writing HTML5 apps. It'll get better.
And keep using EPUB for your books.
Well, I think J.P. Rangaswamy should be buying all you guys iPads if you don't have them, but that's just me. And I want to thank you, Blaine, for coming on the show. It was really enjoyable to have you. We'd like to have you back if you're willing.
Sure. No, thanks. It was fun.
Okay, Kevin Marks, I want to thank you. Robert Scoble, I want to thank you. Doc Searls, it's good that we're both alive. And I want to thank Rackspace, and particularly Rob Legess, without whom the show would not be back on the air, and the folks at New Tech, without whom the show would not be visible because of.
By the way, Steve, congrats on the new job.
Thank you. I start Monday, and then we'll see whether or not I can be credible or not. According to Mike Arrington, I'm now a slut or a whatever. I'm now hopelessly conflicted, but I've been hopelessly conflicted for years, so I think I'm going to keep up the good work. This is
Maybe
Steve
hopefully
Gillmor.
conflicted.
Exactly. This is Steve Gillmor. This has been the Gillmor Gang. I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.